Welcome to English Through History. If you enjoy the content, then please subscribe or leave us a review. It helps us to create more content and is appreciated by our small team here. We hope you enjoy today's episode. On the morning of August 23, 1973, a botched bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden, set the stage for one of the most perplexing psychological phenomena in modern history. At the heart of the event was a man named Jan Erik Olsson, an escaped convict who walked into the Kreditbanken in Normalstorg Square armed with a submachine gun. What began as a straightforward robbery quickly spiraled into a tense, six-day hostage situation that would captivate global attention and ultimately give birth to the term Stockholm Syndrome. In today's episode, we will detail what happened in the hostage situation, the bizarre behavior of the hostages, and the cultural impact of this event. Olsson stormed into the bank, firing his weapon into the air to assert control. His intentions became clear when he took 4 bank employees hostage, 3 women and 1 man. He then issued demands to the police, a ransom of 3 million Swedish krona, safe passage out of the bank, and the release of his friend and fellow convict Clark Olofsson, who was serving time for armed robbery. To demonstrate his resolve, Olsson tied a noose around one of the hostages and threatened to harm them if his demands weren't met. Authorities had no choice but to negotiate, and they agreed to bring Olofsson to the bank. With Olofsson now joining Olsson, the 2 men fortified their control of the hostages, while the Swedish police and government worked to find a resolution without risking the hostages' life. The hostages were confined inside a cramped bank vault, along with their captors, and as the standoff dragged on for 6 days. What happened within those walls would later become the subject of fascination for psychologists and criminologists alike. Rather than displaying fear or resentment towards their captors, the hostages began to develop an unusual emotional bond with them. Kristin Enmark, one of the hostages, later recalled that Olsson reassured her, saying, "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." He even draped his coat over her shoulders when she felt cold. These small acts of kindness, coupled with the extreme stress and isolation of the situation, seemed to create a sense of dependence and trust between the hostages and their captors. At the same time, the hostages began to view the police and the government authorities as a greater threat to their safety than the robbers. This shift in perception became evident when a phone call Enmark made to Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme during the ordeal. She pleaded with Palme to allow Olsson and Olofsson safe passage out of the bank, saying she trusted the captors with her life but feared the police might escalate the situation and put her at risk. "I am not afraid of Clark and the other guy," she told the Prime Minister. "I am afraid of the police." The hostage crisis finally ended on August 28, when police used tear gas to force the robbers to surrender. Remarkably, all 4 hostages were released unharmed, and the 2 captors were taken into custody. However, what truly baffled investigators and the public was the behavior of the hostages after their release. Rather than expressing relief or anger towards their captors, the hostages defended them. Some even hugged Olofs and Olofsson before parting ways, and they later refused to testify against them in court. Their empathy towards the captors was so profound that it appeared to defy logic. The hostages' statements and actions raised questions about the nature of trauma and human behavior under extreme duress. In the aftermath of the incident, the term Stockholm Syndrome was coined by criminologist and psychiatrist Nils Bergerud, who had assisted the police during the standoff. Bergerud used the phrase to describe the hostages' apparent emotional attachment to their captors, a phenomenon that seemed to be rooted in their psychological response to the trauma. Stockholm Syndrome is now recognized as a psychological condition in which the hostages or victims of abuse develop positive feelings, loyalty, or even affection towards their captors or abusers. Experts believe this response is a survival mechanism. In situations of extreme stress or fear, victims may align themselves with the captors as a way to reduce the perceived threat and improve their chances of survival. By empathizing with the captor and seeking their approval, the victim can create a sense of safety within a terrifying and uncontrollable situation. Since the credit banking incident, the concept of Stockholm Syndrome has been applied more broadly to describe similar dynamics in various contexts, such as abusive relationships, cults, and human trafficking. However, it remains a controversial and debated concept in psychology. Some experts argue that Stockholm Syndrome oversimplifies a complex set of psychological and emotional responses, while others question its validity altogether due to its lack of empirical evidence. Critics also point out that the term tends to pathologize victims, implying irrationality or weakness, when in reality, their behavior may be a rational response to a life-threatening situation. For instance, in the credit banking case, the hostages' feelings of trust and dependence towards their captors may have been a practical coping strategy to avoid harm. Despite the debate, Stockholm Syndrome continues to be a powerful cultural reference, often portrayed in movies, literature, and media to illustrate the complex interplay between fear, dependency, and human connection. The Stockholm Syndrome incident remains one of the most famous hostage situations in history, not only because of its dramatic nature, but also because of the lasting psychological insights it offered. The hostage's behavior challenged conventional assumptions about how people react to trauma and danger, highlighting the adaptability of the human mind in extreme situations. For the hostages themselves, life after the ordeal was not without challenges. They faced scrutiny from the public and the media for their perceived sympathy towards their captors, while psychologists and criminologists analyzed their every word for clues about their experience. Kristin Enmark, in particular, became a prominent figure in discussions about Stockholm Syndrome, often sharing her perspective on the incident to counter misconceptions about her feelings and motivations. As for the captors, both Olsen and Olofsson served time in prison for their roles in the robbery and hostage-taking. Olofsson later became something of a celebrity in Sweden, maintaining that he had done nothing wrong and even suggesting that he had helped protect the hostages from harm. Olsen, on the other hand, expressed regret for the ordeal, but remained a central figure in the narrative of Stockholm Syndrome. The robbery was a turning point in our understanding of human psychology under duress. The term Stockholm Syndrome may have originated from a specific moment in time, but it continues to resonate in discussions about trauma, resilience, and survival. The hostages' unexpected bond with their captors reminds us of the complexity of human emotions and the ways in which we adapt to extraordinary circumstances. Nearly 50 years later, the story of the Stockholm bank robbery remains a fascinating case study in the fragile and unpredictable nature of human connection.